It's great to be among friends. Larry and I go back a long way to the early meetings of ASFPM, and it is clearly the most family-oriented, the opportunity to get together with our own families, but you as a family, and talk about the issues that worry us. Imagine you're living in Hamburg, Iowa, and a flood comes along. You go out to see a friend, and that friend says, "I didn't know I was at risk." Okay. So you didn't hear all the wonderful things I said before. That's okay.
I did.
What a great time it is to be here. In any case, imagine that you're living somewhere in Iowa. There's been a big flood. You go out and see the person that's flooded. They say, "I didn't know I was at risk." That's the saddest thing going. They didn't know they were at risk because they couldn't then do anything about it. We've argued about definitions. Many people say the definition of resilience is the ability to get knocked down and get up and continue what you're doing. Well, we've learned, Howard and I were sitting peacefully 7 years ago on something called the National Academy Disaster Roundtable when 9 federal agencies came to the Academy and said, "Study resilience, tell us what a good definition is, and then tell us some of the things we ought to do about it." One of the things we learned right off is that my definition was pretty good, get knocked down, but you gotta know that you're liable to get knocked down so you can figure out what you're gonna do when you get up. It's when you get that blindsided hit that kills you. If you know what to do about it, if you know your risk, if you understand that, you can do something. So you've got to be prepared, you've got to plan for, you've got to decide and assess what that risk is, you've got to have plans to deal with what you get up, and when you get up, you want to hit with your right or your left. Well, that means you've got to plan the future that may not have been the same as the one you had before you were knocked down. And he and I authored a chapter in the report on disaster resilience that dealt with the cycle of determining what that risk is, assessing it, developing strategies, implementing them, and then going back and checking to see how well they'll work. That's critical to what we're doing. It's critical to what we're doing. How do we deal with this? I want to make a side comment that resilience is considerably more than infrastructure. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the things we talk about get focused on infrastructure. Sarah mentioned the economics and the environmental. We've talked about social, that's very critical. But the essentials of resilience span everything we do. And when we in the flood community work, we've got to work with all our partners. We now, the Academy, is working with Charleston, Cedar Rapids, Seattle, and a couple of other communities. And we've learned that the floodplain people know what's going on, but the other people don't know what the floodplain people know. So how do we get everybody involved? So it's everybody's job to put resilience on the table as culture. We've got to think in a resilient manner as we move along. I want to jump to the second part of that, this business of knowing you were hit, the farmer in Hamburg who didn't know they were at risk. In 2007, the Water Resource Development Act, included a provision that said, the president will find the flood vulnerability of this country. He will define it. Go out and do it. Nothing's been spent. The Congress has not given any money to SAM to get that done. And that the White House keeps saying we need to do this, but nobody's worried about it. Nobody seems in Washington to be concerned about it. Yet, how do you deal with the issues we're talking about? We're going to have communities working on resilience, yet they don't know the fundamentals of their risk. How do you find out where you're at risk? Fortunately, we had the good opportunity yesterday to listen to John Dorman talk about what can be done when the resources are directed to dealing with the issue. Communities that have those resources are able to capitalize on, at the fundamental level, on the topography, the data models that give you the information you need at the resolution you need, allow you then to move forward. Good data, a National Academy report called Mapping the Zone said, good data pays off not only in the floodplain, it pays off in planning and the social networks that are created, understanding your neighborhoods, the environmental issues that are there, what's at risk. So much more can come out of this. Yet we're not spending money on that. No wonder we can't determine the national risk. We don't know what the topography is. So we've got to figure out where we're going. I will leave you with a thought, and the thought is tomorrow is going to be different than today. There is a wave coming. Yes, sea level, there may be another hurricane, but that wave is the wave of change, and the millennials are leading that. When you get into a car with a millennial, or maybe even today, you don't see them carrying in a paper map. What are they carrying? This is a BlackBerry. I have an iPad, but BlackBerry does a good job. You can get most of what you need. But just imagine, as John described yesterday, if you had all that information and I went to look at a house on Zillow and it told me everything about the flood susceptibility of that home, told me about what the evacuation plans were in that community, I guarantee you that millennials are going to demand that. And so what we've got to be doing is planning to build this resilience, is to build in the technologies, the new social structures that we're going to have, the community organizations that we need, in order to make resilience a whole of community effort that takes advantage of the technologies and the new ways of doing things. We may not have flood maps in 10 years. We may only have this. Why would you want to pick up a map when you can find it all out right here? I'll tell you, my 14 grandchildren don't use maps, they use this. And so I would hope we'll all meet in a short while, 5 or 10 years, at one of these conferences, and we'll be looking at the national vulnerability indices on our cell phones or whatever else we have. And I don't know whether it'll all be the watches that Apple's going to sell or something embedded in your ear that sticks it directly into your brain. But I'm telling you, this change is coming, and resilience means we've got to be prepared for it.
Thank you.